Hi, I'm Mr. Miyagi, and this is Mr. Miyagi's Workshop. Today is episode 3 of Rand When Part, the clean and paint. Should be a good episode, hopefully. Stay tuned. Okay, this is what we're using here. Using some gunk. That's the foaming kind to clean these Yamaha cases. Basically just follow the instructions and we'll just let this sit and work. I've already sprayed them once. I'm coming back and spraying them again because I want this is pretty gunky stuff, and hopefully that'll clean them up a little better. So you can see that I've got it also into the tank. I pressure washed it out there. I got a good 85% of it off, and I'm doing the rest here, cleaning it up in my solvent tank. Now, I realize that some of you don't have a solvent tank. You can use a small tub. Do not, I repeat, do not use gasoline. I've seen too many accidents happen from gasoline. So promise me you won't do that. They also make some water soluble style cleaners that you can use. Soap and water will work. Takes a little bit more effort. Right here my tank is I'm filled with regular solution that I got at the auto parts store. So anyway, she's starting to clean up pretty darn good. So when I'm done here, I'll get a good shot of it when it's clean. So this is what I've gotten so far on the cleanup. They're looking a hell of a lot better. There's still a couple of spots like down in there. Over there I got to clean up a little bit more, but you know, all in all, 99% of it is off. I've got this cover and this cover for the sound pen for the starter in the tub right now soaking. I'll let that soak overnight. They're pretty gross. So anyway, you can do this. It just takes time, a little bit of elbow grease, and there you have it. Now I'll have to decide whether I want to paint these cases or just leave them raw like they are. Okay, in the previous part we had taken the cases apart, and I spent all day yesterday cleaning the cases and painted them, cleaned them out really well. One thing you want to do on these cases that when you're painting them, that's if you paint them, you don't have to paint them. You want to make sure that you keep all the metal surfaces that are going to be contacting, like the mounts. Keep the mounts, any part that's going to have a seal on it, you want to keep it clean. Now what I ended up doing is that I sprayed these cases. I taped off a bunch of it. I used little items like this that I made up for plugging the holes on the drain parts. I literally just put the plugs in and painted them in place. Now if you wait an hour or so after it kind of sets a bit, you can come back with either some fine sandpaper or what else, or like this, a little razor knife, and clean these areas up to make sure they're good. Because like on this one here, there's a copper gasket that goes under, or a fiber gasket. And like this is where the starter mounts, and you want all these things to sit and be good and solid on there. What happens with if there's any paint on there, eventually wears and it may loosen up the bolts. When I did the cases though, I put them together. These were all put together. They I slid them together and I painted it in that. I made little plugs so they wouldn't get any paint on the bearing surfaces. Same here like this, when these all go together. So, and then I just took a slightly screwed them together and then I put the caps on where they needed to be, and then came back afterwards and cleaned everything up. This is a type of paint. It's just a gloss black. Works really nice with this little spray handle, like a real spray gun almost. This seal needs to come out. And we also have, let's see, this case right here. Yeah, let me get this all around here. This case, this point right here, there's a bearing for the shift hub that needs to be removed. So underneath the Mickey Mouse blanket, these are also the other things that I did yesterday. I cleaned and lubed all these parts. I put on a few new bearings, replaced, let's see, this is a tail shaft bearing for the transmission, replaced the bearing, the main bearing on the crankshaft. One of the reasons why I replaced that bearing there is that when you spin it, I could feel lumpage or it grabbing or rust. Now, you can see that this surface had some rust, and there's a lot of little rust spots down in there, because this side of the case, which would have been the clutch side of the case, where this bearing fits in, was exposed to the elements, and I got a feeling that it got a little rusty. I had another bearing. These bearings are about 65 bucks each. They're not cheap, but this is where the main force of it, this is what this drives the clutch side, so there's a lot of torque onto these bearings. That's why they're so big. Another thing that I did do is I went over the crankshaft bearings and such, double checked all of them, lubed them all up, checked them and everything. Another thing that I did on the transmission, oh yeah, now on the guide shaft on the for the transmission for the shifting forks, you want to also make sure that this is good and clear, because this one, when you install this, there's a little hole here on the back side that oil goes through and then lubricates the shaft through these little holes here. So it keeps that all lubricated up. So one of the major things I did too is I went through and I blew out all these little journals, made sure that all these little oil journals were clear. So let's remove the seal. Now all I've done here is I've taken a socket and reversed it and pop that out. That is the seal for the starter. So you basically, all I did is I found a socket that was close in size and punched it out. And then on this one, for the bearing for the shift drum, that one there was a little stiff, so where is it? I have a rod here, a drift, and you can just take that out. So we have this little bearing here, the 8-0855, that will go back into the case. Now what I ended up doing is I made a drift so that will fit that to insert it back into the case. And there, reinstalled. One more little tap. So that basically what that does is it fits the inside of the bearing, and it has a ridge stop, so it can't go any further. And I just tap it back in place in alignment. Now when I put this together, I will definitely lube that bearing up extensively. And normally what I use, I'll either use like this stabilizer. This stuff is pretty sticky, or you can use assembly lube, engine assembly lube. Either one of these will work, or just a good sticky oil to put it back together again. Now these are just simple things that I made up. I do have a lathe, so I just turned down a stock of metal that I had, some aluminum, and this is just a rod that I had that was about the right size to fit this. And my hammer. So basically we've got the new bearing installed there. The seals and everything we're going to put back together. Put this in. A lot of these seals we're going to put in at the time the cases go back together. When this starter goes back up in here and fits, you really need to pull this cap off, which we'll do here in a minute, and replace that inner seal in there too, because that can allow oil from the engine into your starter, which if you're going to reinstall it, I would definitely replace that seal. And you replace this one. Plus there's a shifting fork seal that we need to put in place here. So we're going to install the starter seal. And just place that in there. I happened to find something that was darn close to the outside diameter of the seal. So basically all you're doing is you're going to tap that back in there. To where it's flush on the inside there. So you can see right in here it's flush. Shift seal, same thing. I have a little tool that's about that size. Alright, seal installed. We're just bringing it down to its flush there. So now what you want to do is that I put this in the vise, and you can see I've already started to take stuff apart here. Another thing you can do if you want to check this thing, this all comes apart. So it's a good idea to pull this thing apart and clean it, double check stuff. To get that seal out of there. And here's another thing you want to pay attention to. There's a metal washer and a fiber washer. And those go in right on here on this shaft, and the fiber washer out. And then there's also a shim for the backside. Now, what you can do is you can take some fine emery cloth and just clean this area up. Get that cleaned up there a little bit. What you also want to do is you want to go through and make sure that these fins are clean. And that makes sure that you have a good contact on all of the windings. So when the brush is right on that. And almost done here. When I was growing up, my father actually literally had an armature tool for doing this, and worked quite well. We used to rebuild our own starters for the cars and everything. So this seal won't come out of here. You can't get in to push it this way. This also has a bearing in here. So you need to clean this area up a little bit. And a lot of times what I'll use on cleaning is I'll either use brake fluid or a carburetor cleaner. Comes in a can. It's kind of nice. Cleans it up nicely. Sometimes these don't come out as easy as you want. You just have to work them out of there. Now I've taken a screwdriver and made a tool I use this for scraping and sometimes even removing seals. Be gentle with all this. What I'm doing here is I'm very carefully going around the edge of this lip of the seal itself. So basically what I'm doing is I'm applying that screwdriver, this tool that I made up, to slide down in between here and the surface. You want to be real careful not to gall up the inside there, so pay attention to that. But if you can walk around there, and you can see here I've kind of pushed in everything, and then all you have to do is you can reach in there with a pair of pliers and pull it out. Now the outer rubber is going to stick to it, so you're going to have to clean up the inside of that area there. So we'll take a little bit of our sandpaper here, or emery cloth, and go around and clean up the inside of that seal area. A lot of times though, people will find that their starter isn't working properly, and it's due to the fact that this wasn't, the seal had been leaking around the shaft, and can cause a little bit of problems. And you just want to make sure that you get that rubber out of there that's from the old seal. So I'm just basically working this out. Now another thing I like to do, especially in this area, because the way you have to pull those seals out of there, is I'll put a little bit of sealant around the edge of this seal itself. You don't need much, so I like to just use the old standard Permatex gasket sealer. It's apply a little on there, get it around there. This just helps seal in case there was any scarring in the case when you were taking out the seal itself. And you can see that pushes in fairly easy. There, got a new seal in. And if you noted the way I put that seal in, this way is wrong, this way is right. What you're trying to do, if you do it this way, it'll allow the grease or the oil to go through. If you put it this way, it stops it from going into the starter itself. So so make sure when you install the seal, you install it with the face towards the the inside of the starter, not the outside. With the new seal installed and a clean up on the armature, which looks pretty darn good. So we're going to end up popping this top off. Now there's 2 long screws and there's 2 short screws. The 2 long screws hold the case together. The short screws only hold the bushing cap on. But both sides have seals. These rubber seals that go around here, they're like a big rubber band. Try not to damage those. All right. Pull this out, and it comes out. Everything looks good there. You can see these bushings are in pretty good shape. And we'll wipe out the inside just a little bit. Another thing that we will do, we will apply a little bit of assembly grease on the inside, not a lot. These are basically self-oiling bushings here, they're impregnated with some sort of lubricant. All right, so what we want to do is want to slide the armature back into place. Just put a little bit of lubricant on that seal so it'll slide up in there nicely. And that should clip into a little lock there. Okay, so we want to get this all pushed on. Now, you've noticed what I've got here is I've just got a piece of tubing. So I got it, gets me up into where I can look at it and make sure that everything is properly lined up. This cap, there's a little notch that on the front piece that sits in when you're doing your initial lineup of everything. So that drops in there. Push that in. Rotate it so it drops down in there. It's clear. And you can look on this side here where the screw holes are at. So this is relatively where, this is where these notches, to where these should be able to drop right down into the, and hook into. So kind of pay attention to that. There's a lot of stuff to pay attention, but you know, it's not all that difficult. You don't get in a hurry, like I've said in the past. Use a little screw to kind of get everything started here. Don't force it. It will go easy. Sometimes you just need to pry that over just a little bit. Try not to cross thread these. It's easy to do. Just don't get it. Everything should turn easily. If it doesn't, then there's something that's not lined up properly. And like I said, when you tighten up this screw on this side or wherever side you started on, basically it's that one, it will bring the other screw hole, threaded screw side up. Now when you look down this should be somewhat in line, hopefully. And that should lock into its, there should be a little lock there that everything into place. And I usually just look down and eyeball everything to make sure those are all going in proper. And my favorite tool, give it a tap. There we go. This one here got a little bunged up taking it out, so I'm very cautiously putting this back together here. There we go. All right. Spins nicely. All right. So now you've got a new seal in. This is all cleaned up. The armature did. What we can do is we can bench test it right here. Went and got my battery and some jumpers, and I've hooked up the ground to the frame of the starter, and now we're going to do a quick test. I've had my positive is hooked up on the starter terminal, and you kind of want to hang on to these. Oh yeah, you see that? Works good. So we're back in business. These starters are pretty tough. I have been amazed at how well these hold up. Unless they've been sitting underwater, and then they don't work so good. Well, this brings us to the end of this segment on cleaning and painting your cases on your XS650, plus a little starter information and what you should do about it. So if you've liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And then on that subscribe, push that little ringy-dingy bell, and then push all. Because that way you'll get all my episodes, or whenever it pops up. So y'all take care out there and stay safe. We'll see you next time around. This is Mr. Miyagi signing off.